Wouldn't it be grand if you could take rubbish wood like this and turn it into something useful like this? G'day, and welcome to my very first woodwork video and my very first woodwork project for the Wouldn't It Be Grand YouTube channel. My name's Jamie, and if you're new to the channel, well, I'm also new to the channel. This first video is a submission to Mark Dainer from Dainer Made's Rubbish Wood 21 Challenge, and you can see here that I've chosen the most rubbish wood that I could possibly find. Over the past many years, I've been traveling the world making promotional videos for various tour companies, and one of the things that most tour companies do is visit wineries. I've been to some spectacular wineries. Now, in all the wineries all over the world, the one thing that I've never seen is this premium Australian wine in a box. Now, inside this box, you find a bag of wine. And yes, I did have to buy 2 boxes for this video. Now, this cask wine is known in Australia as a goon bag or a goon sack or even chateau cardboard. And if you combine it with another iconic Australian invention, the Hills Hoist clothesline, you can play Goon of Fortune. But not only that, when it's empty, it doubles as a pillow. Now, the other genius thing about bag-in-a-box wines is this nifty little tear out. Push your fingers through the side of the box here, pull out the spout, mount it here, and you've got yourself a high-quality wine dispenser. So that's what I'm making, a wine dispenser for the workshop. So I found it very easy to find some rubbish wood lying around the shed. This is old firewood here, and some old packaging wood that came with some deliveries. After gathering it all together, I laid it down to see what I had to work with. First thing, check square. Then cut these pine boards down to the same size, getting rid of the tongues and grooves from either side of the boards. Here I'm setting my table saw to 45 degrees and cutting a new groove in my old table saw sled. It's time to make a new sled for a new table saw anyway. Here was my first mistake of the project, so I flipped the board over and cut it to the correct side. Looks pretty good to me. So I used a clamp to make a stop block to make sure that both sides were the same size. Also looks pretty good to me. Cutting down what will become the trim to a more manageable size and getting rid of the old nails. And then cutting them down to thin strips. Here's a piece of wood left over from renovation that was already cut at 45 degrees. And I decided to use French cleats on this system as it's going to be easier to get the box on and off the wall when I need to fill it with wine. So I'm cutting 2 pieces here, one the same size as the back of the box and one slightly shorter that will go on the wall. And I used the piece here to measure to see where the back of the box is going to sit. This is my hand-built table for my trim router, and I'm measuring the thickness of the backing board to see what size router bit I'll need. Setting the distance here to give clearance for the French cleat. And using my Duresta ice pick to clean out the groove. So satisfying. Here I changed to a router bit with a better profile for some decorative trim.
And I also rounded over the backside of that with a cove bit, but I didn't show that in the video. Using a straight edge here to make sure that I get the front all lined up with each other. Then setting up for the blue tape method for glue up. The backing sheet was too tight a fit for the router grooves, so I used a smoothing plane here just to take a little bit off each of the edges. Once that was done, slot it in the back and glue up. Using a bit of persuasive force here to square up the corners. And I think we're square. The cleat for the back of the box was cut to fit perfectly, so I'm adding a bit of glue here, then I'm adding some small nails just to hold it in place until the glue dries. Now onto the front panel. I know my miter saw is square, so I used it to square up this piece, and then took it to the table saw to cut a parallel side to that, although I didn't show that in this video. Now that I've got three sides perfect, I used a sharpened picker pencil to mark where I need to cut the top edge. And back to the table saw for that. Perfect. Removing the webbing clamp and the tape, and the box looks good. Now I'm marking the center of the front panel to work out where to put the hole for the spout. Here I'm using a 30mm spade bit to create the hole, but I did change that to 32mm to be able to fit around the spout and to be able to hold with the door closing. And the first time in this video that the Sandman enters. Here I'm gluing some thin strips of pine 3mm away from the front edge. This will create a channel between them and the decorative trim on the front, and the front board can slide in between them to close down around the nozzle. And I'm using the bottom half of the front board here just to get my thicknesses. Now I'm setting up a 3mm router bit here just to take a little bit of the front of the top panel away so the board can slide in flush. And a chisel just to clean things up. Perfect fit. I really love using Japanese pull saws, and for fine work like this, my Dazuki and my rafting square give me perfect miter cuts every time. It also means I can measure directly to the box, rather than taking a measurement and taking it to a miter saw. Now off camera, I use my belt sander to sand away a small groove on the bottom piece of trim so it doesn't interfere with the pouring of the wine. I glued and clamped the bottom and two sides of the trim, but not the top piece for now. When it was dry, time to enter Sandman again. Then I used the smoothing plane just to flush up a piece of the trim. Now for the second mistake of the project, I didn't factor in the thickness of the primer and the paint on the front panel to be able to slide inside the channel. And you can see that I've just worked that out now. So I used a steel ruler and an amazing little scraper I got from Banggood to scrape away those layers of paint and bring it back to normal size again. Once that was done, I used tape to cover up those channels so that when I spray the box, paint's not going to fill those channels up. Then I used some old magazine pages to seal the back to stop it from being painted as well. Once that was done, I gave it a coat of primer all over, and I did sand the primer after it had dried. Now when it came time to put the front piece of trim onto the board, also acting as a handle to slide the front panel out, I realized it was going to be very hard to stop it from pulling away from the rest of the box. So I came up with the system here of drilling down through the top trim into the side pieces of trim, then using a nail to go in through both pieces and hold it flush to the front. The nail was a little too snug for the hole, so I gave it a quick sand, all out of focus of course. I widened the holes a little bit side to side with a drill so the nail could fit in a little bit easier but not fall forward. Then I used a small hacksaw to cut the nail down to size. And after using a drop of super glue, I tapped the nail into its home in the top piece. Now to check to see if it all worked. Perfect fit. Here I taped up the two sides of the front panel so that it will slide in the channel without more paint. Now onto the final colour, and I used the Montana Black cans and I used Power Red. And I can tell you I'll be using this one again for another project in the future. I love this red. For some reason, I got a very small gap where the two boards meet around the wine spout. So I cut two small strips from some garbage packaging, sprayed them red and super glued them in place, and you can barely even tell in the final pictures. I couldn't find the letters that I wanted in white, so I bought gold ones and sprayed them white. Once the paint had dried, I couldn't separate the paint from the letters, and you can see here I was trying to cut out each individual letter, but it just wasn't working. Luckily, I found some white letters on special order, and although they're not the same size as I wanted, they worked a treat. And here's a little trick I used to remove some of the stickiness from the tape for using as a guideline. I just run it on my work shorts a few times and we're good. And there you go, we're all complete. The only thing that could have topped this off would be a wood-turned wine glass from Dale, from Del Bassa Timbers, but all I could get was this fake look one on eBay.
Now, if you find yourself with some rubbish wood, the only other thing to do with it is put it on the fire. That was a fun first project. Thanks for joining me, and I hope it'll be the first of many. I also have my own Wouldn't It Be Grand stickers, and if you'd like to do a sticker swap with me, contact me on Instagram. Wouldn't It Be Grand? I'll swap them up for you. Cheers.